Welcome back to Elevator Paso, guys. We're going to be speaking with Max Grossman, who is an associate professor of art history at UTEP, and he's going to be telling us a little bit about a book he just wrote, a book he has coming up, and some of the societies in town that he belongs to and is part of the board. Max, how are you?
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, Caleb.
Thank you for being here. It's really, to me, thrilling to have you here. I mean, the vast wealth of knowledge that you have about our city is really impressive. And I'm hoping we could get just a tiny bit about all these things. But first of all, you have a book coming up.
Yeah, I'm writing a book called El Paso Architecture. It's under contract for Arcadia, and it's going to have 231 photographs. And it's the first synthetic architectural history of El Paso. So it'll cover everything from the Kingdom of Spain in the 1600s,
Wow.
right through World War II, and most of the key buildings. And so we'll talk about the Adobe period, the period when everything was made of Adobe, up until 1881. Then the arrival of the railroads, which brought in bricks and stone and other materials. And that's the Victorian period of the Old West. And then after 1908, a new technology, reinforced concrete, the age of the modern skyscraper. So really, Adobe, Victorian, reinforced concrete, and all the great architects, and most of our iconic buildings will be in the book.
How long did it take you to produce this?
This book is about a 1-year project,
Yeah.
and I'm almost done. Another month or so, I'll be finished.
Excellent. So out of all the buildings in the book, which is the one that sticks out the most to you?
My favorite building?
Yeah.
That's really tough. I think my favorite building in El Paso is the Popular Department Store building.
Yeah.
Henry C. Trost, 1917. And it's one of the few major buildings downtown that's not been restored yet. So it needs some help.
Max, am I mistaken, but wasn't that building serving as a lodge at some point?
Well, before that building, there was a Masonic lodge there.
Oh, that's what it is.
And that was acquired by Adolf Schwartz and his family, and eventually demolished and replaced by the current building.
And that was it was a 4-story building, right?
I can't recall. Approximately, I think so, yes.
Yeah. Excellent. And right across from it, we have the First National Bank.
It's nearby. It's on San Antonio Avenue, about a block down, yes.
With that golden door, that's amazing.
It is amazing.
So, story says that some of the members of the lodge that was where the Popular building was were the ones that actually did the bank and founded it and started it, I believe, because I was really a Shorts fan.
Well, there were a lot of Masons in El Paso, important ones, so that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, and then tell me about what you want to do with this book. Is this the purpose of the book just to let people know about the architecture, or do you want to spotlight El Paso? What sprung you to do this?
Well, there is no book that covers the history of El Paso's architecture, all of it, right? There's a very good book from 1981 just on Trost, and there are other small books or articles on one specific thing or another, but this book will cover everything. So again, from the earliest known architecture during the Kingdom of Spain through the Republic of Mexico, right through the period of the Old West, the Mexican Revolution, and then of course the Trost brothers, Otto Thorman, Mabel Welch, our great local architects. So it's a way to make the total architectural history available to the non-specialist.
Yeah.
So anybody can read this, school children, specialists, or just anybody, and it'll be inexpensive and widely available. Our first print run will be 1,000 copies.
Yeah. And you were telling me about a restoration of Pancho Villa's stash house.
Yes.
And tell me about this. Sounds so fascinating.
Oh, it's exciting. In Duranguito, there's only one building in that historic barrio that actually has a historic marker. And it's called the Casa Clandestina, or the Pancho Villa Stash House. And it's an 1898 adobe building that was acquired by a man named Enrique Guajardo, who owns the Mini Mart at the corner of Leon and Paisano Drive. He bought the building 5 years ago and restored it beautifully back to 1898. And the building's famous because Pancho Villa and his brother stored weapons and gold and jewels there during the Mexican Revolution and used it as a point for smuggling material into Mexico to finance and provision his army.
Yeah.
So the US government raided the building in 1915 and took everything, took all the money and everything. And this really angered Villa and his faction. Eventually, Villa attacked Columbus, New Mexico, killing some Americans, and the U.S. responded by invading Mexico and chasing Pancho Villa and his army all over Chihuahua State.
Yeah.
So that whole conflict really began in that building. And that's just one of many buildings in our downtown that has incredible history that could potentially drive heritage tourism, which is a fast-growing sector of the Texas economy, heritage tourism. And it really shows the potential of our downtown architecture, not just the big, huge hotels and banks, but even the small little buildings that have important history.
Now, we were talking off camera a little bit about how there needs to be a balance between what gets preserved and allowing for the city to progress and develop a little more. How does somebody like yourself come with a definition and determination of what buildings ought to be preserved?
Well, I mean, I would never say that every building has to be preserved, but certainly the most important ones. And El Paso, people don't understand. We have a treasure trove of architecture here. I mean, really amazing building stock, not just within Texas, but nationally recognized buildings. So currently, there are 25 buildings in downtown El Paso on the National Register of Historic Places. And when you're on the National Register, these buildings can be restored at a discount. There are federal and state tax credits that can cover 45% of the cost of restoring the buildings. And that's why Paul Foster is restoring the Hilton Hotel and the Crest department store. Those are 2 of the 25. And that is why Lane Gaddy restored Bassett Tower. He got millions of dollars in federal and state tax credits without using 1 penny of local taxpayer money. So these are revenue positive projects. And right now I've been working with El Paso County on a project to establish in downtown El Paso and our urban barrios, Duranguito, Segundo Barrio, and Chihuahuita, what is called a National Register Historic District. And that would create a National Historic District in downtown. Dallas has one, Austin has one, Galveston has one. In fact, we're the only major city that doesn't have one. And once that is created, another 845 buildings will be added to the National Register of Historic Places, all of them tax credit eligible. So you can imagine the bonanza of historic preservation and how much that will drive our economy from builders and painters and plumbers and so on, landscapers. And then, of course, you're restoring beautiful old buildings and you're capitalizing on what makes El Paso authentic and unique and genuine. And you're offering an experience to the visitor that is El Pasoan. Local food, local history, beautiful architecture. And that is what San Antonio and Galveston and Fredericksburg and other Texas cities have accomplished. And the plan is to take us in that direction.
Where is this proposed district?
Well, the boundaries have been drawn up by the county, and the process is moving forward. Now it's with the Texas Historical Commission in Austin. They're reviewing our project. And the boundaries basically are everything from the freeway down to the river. And from Cotton east all the way to Santa Fe Street. So
That's
a huge
really
area,
big.
huge area. And the firm that the county hired to survey the area determined objectively that there are 845 buildings, enough to form a district, that are nationally significant.
Wow.
Yeah, we have a lot, okay? That would be more buildings, I think, than any other city in Texas.
Wow.
And the largest historic district in Texas, because we have more history than in any other city in Texas.
Yeah. So, excuse my ignorance, but what would be part of the criteria to make something nationally significant?
Well, number one, is it architecturally significant? The building has to be at least 50 years old, and it has to be in reasonably good condition. It has to have architectural integrity, is the term. or it has to have historical significance. Something very important happened there, something culturally important happened there, a very critical event, or both.
Right.
These are the main criteria, and we have 845.
That's impressive. That is why we should be so proud of our city to
Yeah,
begin with.
I mean, there's a lot going on. Now, new development is important too.
Yes.
And I'd be the first to encourage it, but not at the cost of wiping out critically important historic buildings, because heritage tourism is a multi-billion-dollar economy. It's exploding. El Paso attracts only 2.1% of heritage tourist dollars in Texas. And just imagine that Mesilla, Mexico, Mesilla, New Mexico, which has 3,000 people, they earn more revenue from heritage tourism than El Paso, which has 682,000 people.
Wow, listen away.
So, you know, if we can move in that direction, we can develop an enduring economy. You know, otherwise, you know, for a lot of people, El Paso is a place where you grab a burger and top off your gas tank. We don't want that.
Right.
We want people to bring their families here and stay for the weekend and eat our food and enjoy our neighborhoods and learn about our history and cross the bridge and have lunch in Mexico. And, you know, that's what we are aiming for. Sports is not going to do it, especially second-tier sports. It's might be a good part of the formula, but it's not the complete formula. And we don't need to speculate, Caleb. All we need to do is replicate the successes of other cities. You look at San Antonio. They have run $5 billion through their historic downtown architecture in tax credits.
Wow.
And created over 50,000 jobs in 10 years.
And so we mentioned how progression is still important. So where do we do when there's lack of space for this? Or is there lack of space for this, for bigger buildings to be brought up, new buildings to be brought up?
Well, here's the thing. Anybody who's flown over El Paso in an airplane will be impressed by the immense space around us. So there's nothing but space. And El Paso County is mostly empty. It's this huge county that extends from Anthony all the way to Horizon City. So space has never been a problem. Now, if we want to go into our existing neighborhoods, we have to make some difficult choices if we want to build new buildings. There are a lot of empty lots, a great number of empty lots in downtown, for example, and those are ripe for development. There are also certain city blocks that do not have important buildings. Even if they're historic, sometimes they're not important. So there are plenty of development opportunities. Is there room for, say, a soccer stadium? I don't think so. You know, that and parking ramps and so on. Those kinds of projects really belong on the edge of town, maybe near a freeway exit, and not drop like a bomb in the middle. You see, Caleb, our historic downtown core, which tells our entire story from, you know, the Native Americans thousands of years ago through the arrival of the Spanish through the present day, is less than 1% of the surface area of El Paso County. It's a blip, okay? And downtown and the adjacent urban barrios are just, you know, 50, 60, 70 blocks. So they're pretty precious. And around that, we have a lot of sprawl and a lot of space. So the question is, what do we want that area to look like? And I'd like it to look more like San Antonio or Santa Fe or Fredericksburg or Marfa, a place where people go to experience who and what we are. That is what a historic downtown is for. You don't just go in there roughshod and start knocking down entire city blocks for large public bond projects. And as you know, I'm involved in an effort to prevent one of those. But I do believe that a healthy balance can be struck. Absolutely.
No, and that's part of the formula to be able to be successful, because when you do these buildings, I mean, it's not just the fact that you're getting rid of, you know, history, but it's also huge debt involved for all of us to take up, and our taxes are so bound to rise. Is there a way to be able to encourage developers to do this differently, or why do you suppose that it's there next to all their other buildings?
Well, now you're speaking my language, and we're going to get a little bit controversial here, okay? But a couple of facts. El Paso has the second highest homestead property tax in America.
Yeah, that's
among
ridiculous.
the 50 largest cities. So we're number 2 after Detroit. We have the highest hotel occupancy tax in Texas, 17.5%. We issue debt without voter approval in the forms of certificates of obligation. They're called COs. Dallas has $7 million of CO debt. Houston, $14 million. We have $568.7 million of debt issued without voter approval to cover all manner of things. And we're number 1 in Texas. We have a tax-supported debt of over $2 billion, larger than Austin's.
Wow.
I mean, you look at these figures and you just wonder how we're ever going to pull ourselves out of this hole. And, you know, what does our city do? They pile on more debt. So, you know, a lot of it is in the form of these huge public bond projects, which in my opinion are mostly going to be insolvent. Okay. Other things the city does is it doles out large incentive packages to developers. We read in the El Paso Inc. that there are now 96 incentivized development projects in El Paso amounting to $231 million of taxpayer subsidies of one form or another.
Yeah.
So, you know, I could go on and on. The Great Wolf Lodge, I think that's a boondoggle for the record books. I mean, you know, our city should really get in the habit of spending less. And I'll tell your viewers one thing. Moody's, a very trusted investment service, in December rated El Paso of one of only 4 cities in America that could fail financially in the event of a recession because of our pension liabilities and our debt servicing.
Yeah.
And right now, the market, as of yesterday, corrected 27% since February 16th. That's a drop from the high. The Dow was at 29,551, and now we're trading in the 24,000s.
Yeah.
Actually, I think we're down to the 21,000s. And if that continues and El Paso faces the financial pressure that Moody's tells us we're going to face, we're going to be in very big trouble, Caleb.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, it might be to the point where it's too late for that.
Well, I'm, I'll be, perfectly honest with you. I'm politically very conservative. I'm a libertarian. I'm not a party person. I believe in small government. I don't believe that government should be in the business of entertainment. I don't think it is a role of government to provide us with G League basketball, AAA baseball, soccer, water parks. I believe that all of that should be turned over to the private sector.
Without a doubt.
And if it's profitable, let them assume the capital risk without forcing me to assume their capital risk through public borrowing, subsidies, forgiveness of property taxes, and everything else that they get. Every city does this, Caleb, but in El Paso, it's extreme.
It's overboard. Yeah, I mean, we renovated our old city hall and within a couple of years knocked it down. I mean, it does seem to be a trend for us.
That project is one of the most misunderstood, our AAA ballpark. So just so you understand, the ballpark was supposed to be $50 million. Then it was $64 million. Then they demolished City Hall, which was a $13.5 million property, and the Insights Museum, which is a $1.5 million property. Then they moved the city first into 3 locations, and now it's in 6 locations. So each of those locations had to be renovated. In the case of several of them, purchased outright, renovated top to bottom. Each has its own maintenance, its own infrastructure. It's a domino effect. So right now we're at over $150 million, the cost of the ballpark, which is 86% subsidized by the hotel occupancy tax and the City of El Paso General Fund. So it's a project that could never survive on its own.
Yeah.
It could never survive on its own. And what's worse, attendance is down sharply, double digits since it opened. And we've got 25 more years to go in our contract with Mountain Star Sports, which does not have to release its balance sheets. It's a private entity. So, developers, there's some powerful ones. They do a lot of good things for El Paso, and many of them are great philanthropists, building hospitals and so on. And I'm all for that. But a lot of the same people also, I think, go a little too far. in terms of what they ask from the public in support of some of their private capital projects.
Yeah, it is unfortunate, and it is something that our kids and grandkids will probably be paying for this.
Yeah, but here's the thing, you can leave. And I say that with the maximum seriousness because the population of El Paso last year declined by 269 people. It's the first measured decline on a federal census since the Great Depression. Meanwhile, Sunland Park and Santa Teresa are exploding in population. And we're now seeing El Pasoans, especially retirees, sell their homes and leave to escape from our property taxes. So that creates a death spiral. You get to a certain point and people will be driven away by the tax burden. Here, I pay 8,000 something in property taxes on a pretty basic home. And if I own the same home in Santa Teresa, I'd pay under 2,000.
Yeah.
I'd have a income tax, but every year that income tax in New Mexico is starting to look better than my property tax here. And for retirees who don't have that income tax, they're leaving.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that is a scary thought. I mean, here we've been working so hard to try to keep people here. I mean, the train of thought for most young people is we study and get out of El Paso. And really, that's something that myself and many have been trying to fight and try to let people know that El Paso has the opportunities for you to be able to thrive in business and so on. So that's actually scary to think of. I wasn't aware that we've declined. I mean,
yeah, it's not publicized. You won't read about it in the media. And the media is doing a poor job, I think, of informing El Pasoans about financial issues, our population decline, the risk to our local economy, if there's a market downturn because of the effect that would have on our county and city debt. These are questions that are not dealt with by our local media, and it's very unfortunate. I mean, the El Paso Times has a very small circulation, and most people get their news from the internet these days. Mm-hmm. And it's not always quality news. So it's a real problem, just the challenge of informing our fellow citizens about these realities. In our city government, there really needs to be an adult or two in the room to say, look, certain things we cannot afford.
Right.
And after all, let's face it, what is the role of our government? Fix the roads, pay our police and fire. I mean, there's things that it's supposed to do. And now we've strayed into water parks, basketball, baseball, and areas that are extremely expensive, cost ineffective, and financially dangerous.
Yeah, and once again, the government has no business in there. I mean, that is something that should definitely be private. Max, moving on to something a little more lighter, tell us a little bit about the Tro Society. This is a society that is open to the public and educates on more than just Tros. Tell me about this.
Yes. So the Tro Society was founded by me and Melissa Arras and Mason Sales, Jennifer Cerna, Marcos Fernando's, a group of local people in 2013. And it now has nonprofit status. We have a board of 9. And we're a regional organization. We're headquartered in El Paso, but we cover really the Borderlands region. And our mission is to promote historic preservation and to promote our architectural heritage to El Pasoans as well as to visitors. So we do a lot of educational outreach. We give historical tours of the various neighborhoods, Sunset Heights, downtown, our barrios. And most of our clients, most of the people who participate in our events so far have been El Pasoans.
Yeah.
Who just love to learn about the place where they live, and there's so many things they didn't know. So we focus on the architecture of Henry C. Trost and his brothers. The firm Trost & Trost was the preeminent architectural firm in the Southwest between 1903 and the 1930s.
Yeah.
Built more than 600 buildings in 5 states and Mexico,
Oh,
including
wow.
2/3 of their buildings are, relatively close to this area. So incredible architecture, but not just Trost, also Mabel Welch, a female architect who built hundreds of buildings in El Paso, very talented, 1920s, 1930s. Also Otto Thorman, Edward Kniezel, Gibson and Robertson. These are names that that most El Pasoans have never heard of. But if you learn about these people and you go downtown and into our historic neighborhoods and you start to see what they did,
Yeah.
it's our city is a living, breathing museum.
Yeah.
Just walking down the street in some places.
And that is why it's important to be part of these societies. Max, how do they get information on the Tro Society?
Well, we have our website, thetrosociety.org, and our Facebook page, the Tro Society. And there you can learn about our events. You can become a member. So that's a very important group, I think, in this area. It's the only nonprofit focusing on our architecture, historic preservation, and on promoting our history. So there's that. And I also run a Facebook page called the El Paso History Alliance. The El Paso History Alliance has 55,000 followers. It is the largest Facebook page focusing on history in the entire western half of Texas. And it's a huge community of El Pasoans, former El Pasoans, and others in our region. And we post on architecture, on history, and historical events. So that's another project. And then finally, I just joined the board of Preservation Texas, which is based in Austin. And they do what the Tro Society does, but statewide. So they're based in Austin. It's a larger board. They have millions of dollars in assets. So it's a much stronger organization financially.
Yeah.
And I represent the West Texas region and El Paso, of course. And the good news is they're going to be holding a quarterly board meeting here in September. So the entire board will come here and we get the opportunity to show them what we have.
Yeah.
And to promote El Paso and its region to the whole state. So there are some opportunities there as well.
Max, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you. And you guys stay tuned. Right as soon as we get off camera, I'm going to try to bribe him and see if we could get him to come on board and give us a historical segment every now and then. Max, any last words before we let you go?
It's been a pleasure. It's an honor to be here. Caleb, thank you. And thank you for watching today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thanks.